Tekken 8 launched in January 2024, and people lost their minds. The hype was real, the trailers were insane, and fighting game fans everywhere were ready to crown it the best in the series. But here we are in 2026, 2 years later, and the conversation around Tekken 8 has shifted in ways nobody really expected. Some people still swear by it, others quietly moved on, and a few are asking a question that would have felt crazy back in 2024. Did Tekken 8 actually live up to everything it promised? That question has a complicated answer, and by the time this review is done, you are going to understand exactly why. Let me start with what Tekken 8 is absolutely right, because it does a lot of things right. The moment you boot up the game and get into your first match, something immediately clicks. The combat feels different from Tekken 7 in the best possible way. It is heavier, more aggressive, more confident. Every punch, every kick, every throw carries this satisfying weight that just makes you want to keep playing. Bandai Namco clearly studied what made their previous entries feel great and then turned the volume up on all of it. The core mechanics introduced a system called Heat, and when it first came out, the community was split right down the middle. Some players loved it, some hated it. Now, in 2026, after 2 years of playing, competing, and watching the meta evolve, the Heat system actually holds up better than its critics gave it credit for. It gives every character a kind of power surge mode that changes how you approach pressure and defense. It adds a layer of strategy that was not as obvious in the early days. New players could use it to feel powerful without fully understanding the depth, while experienced players could manipulate it in ways that genuinely changed match outcomes. That balance is not easy to pull off, and Tekken 8 mostly nails it. The roster at launch was solid, not the biggest in Tekken history, but the characters that were there felt polished and distinct. Every fighter plays differently in a way that matters. Jin Kazama, the central character of the story, plays exactly how you want a protagonist to play, technically demanding but incredibly rewarding. King is still one of the most fun grapplers in fighting game history. Reina was a brand new addition and immediately became a fan favorite because her moveset felt fresh while still feeling like it belonged in Tekken. The DLC characters added later were a mixed bag in terms of balance, which caused some frustration in the competitive community, but that is a conversation for another time. Speaking of story, Tekken 8 does something that fighting games almost never do well. It tells a genuinely emotional story. The conflict between Jin and his father Kazuya has been building across multiple games and decades of lore, and Tekken 8 is where it finally pays off in a way that feels earned. The cutscenes are cinematic, the voice acting is strong, and the emotional beats land harder than you would expect from a fighting game. There's a moment in the second half of the story mode that genuinely stopped me, not because of the gameplay, but because of what was happening on screen. That does not happen often in this genre. The story mode itself is generous with its length. You're looking at roughly 8 hours if you play through everything, and the game does a good job of easing newcomers into the mechanics through that campaign. It's not just a series of fights stitched together with cutscenes. There's actual progression, character development, and a conclusion that feels satisfying without completely closing the door on future entries. For Tekken specifically, that's a huge step forward. Visually, Tekken 8 was stunning in 2024. In 2026, it still holds up reasonably well, though modern releases have pushed the bar further. The character models are detailed in ways that border on obsessive. The lighting in certain stages creates a cinematic atmosphere that makes every fight feel like it matters. The stage design itself is worth mentioning because some of these arenas are genuinely beautiful. The Colosseum stage, the rooftop stages, the ones set during storms, they add a visual drama that elevates the experience without distracting from the actual gameplay. It's the kind of art direction that ages better than raw technical power because it has personality behind it. Sound design is another area where Tekken 8 quietly does exceptional work. The soundtrack mixes heavy metal energy with electronic elements in a way that fits the tone of every fight without becoming repetitive. The sound effects are punchy and tactile. When you land a clean combo, you feel it through the audio as much as the visuals. Voice acting across multiple languages is consistent and high quality, which is not something every fighting game can claim. Now, here's where the conversation gets more complicated, because Tekken 8 is not without its problems, and some of those problems have actually gotten harder to ignore as time has passed. The monetization model was controversial from day one, and it did not improve with time. The in-game store features cosmetics at prices that feel aggressive, and the Battle Pass system added post-launch was received poorly by longtime fans who felt it clashed with the premium price tag the game already carried. This is not unique to Tekken 8, and it's a broader industry problem, but it did chip away at goodwill among the core community in a way that's hard to ignore when looking back. The online experience at launch had technical issues. Rollback netcode was implemented, which was the right call and something the community had been asking for, but the execution in those first few months was rough. Matches against players in distant regions were sometimes frustrating. This improved significantly with patches, and by late 2024, the online play was in a much better state, but the window when people were forming their first impressions of the game online was rough, and that left a mark on how some players remember it. The arcade quest mode, which served as a single-player offline experience beyond the story, was entertaining but felt shallow compared to the character episode content from older entries. There was a time when Tekken gave you full character-specific stories with their own endings. In Tekken 8, that depth was missing in a way that players who grew up with the older games definitely noticed. Replay value is high if you're invested in the competitive side of things. Learning a character in Tekken 8 takes genuine time and effort, and mastering even one fighter can take hundreds of hours. The skill ceiling is high, the execution required for advanced play is demanding, and the satisfaction when you finally start landing those high-level punishes and combos is real. For casual players, though, the game can start to feel repetitive once the story mode is done and the novelty of the roster wears off. That gap between casual and competitive Tekken has always existed, but it feels wider here than it did in some previous entries. What does Tekken 8 mean in 2026 compared to everything else out there? Fighting games have continued to evolve, and new releases have pushed accessibility features and content volume further than where Tekken 8 landed at launch. But here's the thing. Tekken 8 still has one of the most mechanically satisfying combat systems in the genre. The feel of the game, the way it responds to your inputs, the rhythm of high-level play, that stuff does not go away just because newer games arrive. Mechanics this well-crafted hold value over time. The legacy of Tekken 8 is going to be defined by two things. First, it's the game that finally gave the Mishima storyline a meaningful conclusion after years of fans waiting for exactly that. And second, it's a game that got a lot of the important stuff right while stumbling in areas related to content and monetization that the industry is still collectively figuring out. That's a complicated legacy, but it's an honest one. If someone asked me right now whether Tekken 8 is worth playing in 2026, the answer is yes, with full awareness of what you're getting. You're getting one of the best feeling fighting games ever made, a genuinely good story for the genre, a deep competitive system that will challenge you for years, and visuals and audio that still hold their own. You're also accepting a monetization ecosystem that is frustrating, and a content offering that leaves gaps a game of this caliber probably shouldn't have. Taking everything into account, the highs, the lows, what it delivers, and where it falls short, Tekken 8 earns a solid 4 out of 5. Not perfect, not flawless, but genuinely great where it counts the most. And in a genre full of games that feel either too shallow or too inaccessible, that matters a lot. If this review helped you figure out where Tekken 8 stands in 2026, drop a like because it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about this stuff. If you want more honest reviews of games old and new without the hype and without the fluff, subscribe and stick around. Share this with someone who's debating whether to pick it up. And if you played Tekken 8 yourself, drop a comment and tell me what you think. Did it hold up for you or did it fade out? Real talk only.